Hello everyone. Sorry for the late start. A little bit of troubleshooting issues getting started, but hello, welcome. Welcome to the Ember Lore Showcase stream, where I'm going to be talking about the Ember lore and the setting and the world building and maybe some of the story, answering some questions, doing all that good stuff. Yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. Today, also doing a giveaway. I think it's going to be the choice of a Foundry license or an Ember game license. I think we're going to do two giveaways. We'll do that sort of when things feel right, maybe in an hour or so, and then maybe one at the end of the stream. And yeah, I'm just gonna start chatting away. I'm gonna kind of like run through some things, and if you have any questions, oh, okay. It's like no audio. No, I made all that introduction. Is audio okay? Okay. Okay. Awesome. Yes, so if you have any questions about the setting, about lore, or anything that you want to ask me, feel free to ask in chat. I've got it up on the other screen. So yeah, I'm just going to start talking about it. This is going to be like a big overview, so if you don't know anything about Ember, specifically like the Ember lore, what the sort of the world is built around, this is what this is going to be about. But I am going to sort of explain what Ember is as well, for anybody that doesn't know. Yeah, I guess we just get into it. I really need to stop saying It's been a long time since I've done any streams. In fact, it was last year that I did a stream for the anniversary of Foundry, so it's been a whole year. But anyway, yeah, so I think the first thing that I want to talk about is like, what is Ember? I imagine that most people in this specific stream know what Ember is because you got the notification, you're probably in the Foundry Discord, you probably have Ember, you know, you're like, oh, I know what Ember is, it's fine. But I'm going to talk a little bit about like how Ember came about, and sort of you can see some of the early screenshots, which I'll talk about in a second. But we're gonna talk a little bit about what is Ember. So Ember is a game made by Foundry VTT, and it is this vast open world sort of exploration story. You know, there's all this cool stuff going on, which I guess you could typically call it like a massive campaign, but it's so much more than that because it's built for Foundry VTT. You know, it's not a book. There's no book rules. It's all sort of written out, and you download it when you have Foundry, and you buy it, and blah, blah, blah. It's great. It's really amazing. There's loads of stuff going on. This isn't the stream that's going to be talking about Ember specifically. You want to ask about the game and the system and the mechanics. That stream is happening on Sunday? Saturday? Andrew, please tell people in the chat if you're there, or Nat. But this stream is more going to go into like the world building and a bit of the story and stuff, that kind of thing. But yeah, so Ember is something that Foundry VTT has made, so it's got its own little team. I'm the art director and the, well, creative director, I guess. Like, I worked out the main story, written all the world building. I don't know, having two titles is confusing. But yeah, I basically work at Foundry and do all that stuff. So that's my role. I've kind of come up with the world and the setting. I've created the world map and the mega region, drawn all of that, which, you know, very fun. Yeah, I mean, the Ember setting, I think, was very important to me personally, because when Andrew and I started talking about making Ember, it was, I think, in 2021, that we first started talking about, oh, we should do something really amazing, we should make a cool thing, you know, maybe we should make a purely digital product. And then we sort of had a couple like meetings and we talked about things for a while, and it wasn't until, you know, maybe 6 months, 7 months, 8 months later that we were like, yeah, we're going to make this a real thing. And we started doing actual planning and organizing. So that's kind of my earliest memories of the Ember production were in June 2022. But yeah, it's a long time ago now. I have a question for Caeora. Please start all your posting caps with question. Yeah. If you have any questions, please ask a question with caps. Question, how long does an average peasant have to work to earn a gold coin? You know, probably a while. Yeah, probably a while. Although it depends where you are. The average person in Ordain is probably going to be... that is a very completely off-topic question, but yeah, it depends. I would say it's easier to earn a gold coin in Ordain, though. I'll get into what that is in a second. Yes, so in June 2022, we started making Ember, which is really cool. Officially, I think, or somewhat. I was doing part-time in Foundry at the time. But actually the Ember setting, which is what I'm talking about today, that idea I came up with in 2018. Not the entire thing, obviously, but like the rough outline for what Ember would become as a setting. I sort of had some world-building ideas back then, and I kind of wrote down some fundamental things. It's changed a lot. It's very different. If you look at that old document and you look at what we have now, it's very different. But there are some key names and concepts and ideas that are like the same thing, so it's very cool. And when we started doing this, we thought it was really important to create our own setting as well. If we're going to go to all the trouble of making a game, we didn't want to make it in somebody else's intellectual property. We didn't want to make it, you know, for somebody else. We wanted to make our own thing. And that was a lot of work. We knew it was going to be a lot of work. It's taken a few years to get anywhere near close to finishing the setting. And it will never be finished, I don't think. I'll be working on it forever, but there's a lot more concrete details out there now. And one of the really major things about making your own IP is you can do new things that you want to do, or that me and Andrew wanted to do. And yeah, it was very important to us, and we were really excited about it as well. So we've probably been developing Ember now for, wow, possibly 4 years? But it's not been a full-on process. At the beginning, it was just me and Andrew, and we were doing planning and things like that. In this image that you can see on the screen right now, you can actually see the this in the... I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse on the screen? Yeah, I hope so. Maybe I should circle it. But in the actual thing here... No, can you not see it? Oh, you can. Okay, I'm actually running these slides in Photoshop. Because I know how to use Photoshop. But yeah, this image here is my first isometric map for the region map. Because we were like, oh, we want to make a cool region map that you can explore, like a hex exploration sort of thing. And I was like, I don't know how to draw in isometric perspective. I'll do a little test. So this is a very old first image of an isometric mega region map, which was a tiny little island, which is pretty interesting. I got a couple questions. Question, what's your favorite race ancestry species that has been developed? Depends what you mean by developed. Zergo. I think for me personally, it was the Zaxine. That's my favorite sort of ancestry, but they're not actually developed yet. They're not in the game world, so that's kind of like... Hi, what is the predicted length of their campaign? Um, Roughly about 2 to 3 years from start to finish. It's a very long campaign. You can start off in the Forest of Stone and go through chapters 1 through 6. It's an incredibly long campaign. It is really cool to see it. I mean, I have vague memories, I guess, nowadays of doing like the original planning with Andrew and sort of working out all of the fundamentals about like what we're going to do. I remember vividly the first hiring process that we did where we hired the first team members on Ember. So we had like a round of interviews, we hired people, and we hired Aaron and Chris Lucky. And Chris Lucky's still working on the project, and he's like awesome. He's written some amazing quests, like A Brush with Death. But yeah, I remember that. But we've done so much over the past few years. Like we've had to learn so many new things that it's like a blur in my brain. I'm not really thinking about what we've done most of the time. Most of the time, I don't have a chance to reflect. I know that Andrew doesn't either. We're just thinking about the next thing, the next patch, the next deadline. You know, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to do the gathering and crafting system. You know, we've got to do all of these things. We just launched the attunement system for the game. You know, I worked with Andrew on that primarily. You know, getting all the flavor and the D&D specific stuff done. And I don't even remember them anymore. I'm just like, oh, that's it gone now. I need to work on them and I need to keep updating them. But no, it's the next thing now. So it's hard to tell sometimes. But yeah, so yeah, that's what Ember is, and that's kind of why we made Ember. We wanted the Ember setting specifically. We wanted our own IP. We wanted the thing that we could control. And over the last couple of years, since I've been thinking about this and putting, you know, impressive amounts of time into developing this whole setting, you know, it's gradually evolved, and you know, I've done the big world map, the cosmos map, you know, worked out the deities and the ancestries and the cultures, the history as well, which I love the history of Ember. It's so rich and detailed. I love like working out all the dates and everything. But I'm going to get into that throughout this whole stream, so you can hopefully see some of the stuff, or I'll talk about some of the stuff that I've been working on. One of the other things I think is important to talk about when I'm talking about the Ember setting that I'm going to talk about now is like what exactly, or what makes Ember special. This is a really cool slide. I'll zoom out a little bit. You know, it's kind of funny because when I was thinking about this, the original planning stage for Ember, it's like, why make your own setting? There's loads of fantasy writers out there, loads of IPs. Can you make something really cool, really like unique? And I was like, yeah, I definitely can. I got so many cool ideas. I read so many fiction, so much fiction, fantasy fiction. I can try. One of the things that sort of me and Andrew thought about really sort of, you know, for a long time on is like, how do we make Ember feel special? And we sort of we hooked on this internal expression, which is like that Ember is imaginative fantasy. And to us, I mean, that can mean different things to different people, but to us, it is kind of like that overwhelmingly fantastical world where you have new ancestries and, you know, new creatures, things you've not seen before. And, you know, in Ember, you have multiple moons in the sky and this massive broken tower edifice that you can see anywhere on the horizon, like looming over you, that's a reminder of, you know, the ancient history and the cataclysm of the shattering that happened 2,500 years ago. So everywhere that you look in Ember, there's magic and impressive, over-the-top, sort of imaginative scale and breadth. And to us, we really wanted to sell that idea that you're in this fantasy sort of setting, not something that's more grounded or gritty or more medieval. We wanted something that's like, boom, you know, you are in a completely different reality, a completely different world. And we actually designed a lot of the sort of, you know, world building and the way things work to make that even more prescient. You know, we made sure that the world that everybody lives on isn't a sphere. It's not a planet. You don't live on a planet. Get into this in a minute, but you're living on a disc burger patty, and there's no universe. There's just a very tight, small cosmos where everything lives. Anyway, that's kind of what makes Ember special. It's very much an imaginative world, and you know, there's so much going on that it just feels, you know, like you're stepping in through a door into another universe. Miroth, yes, this image of Miroth is actually Miroth before Miroth died, which is quite cool. Who is the two women? So the two women in this image here, the one on the left is Caeora, which is a character based on me somewhat. It's like the historian of Ember. Caeora is the character who writes the setting compendium in her voice. So it's kind of me, kind of. Not really, I mean, she has a different personality to me, but kind of me. And the other person is a character called Avwin Towel, who is the leader of a faction called the Sanguinaries that you might meet in-game. Ember is special. Are there round earthers in Ember? This is a fascinating question because this comes up a lot whenever I mention the fact that Ember is a flat world. But yes, there are. We haven't actually developed them very much. We haven't talked about that, but yes, there are. There are people who believe that they live on a round thing because they look up in the sky and the moon's all round. So they're like, oh well, maybe we live on a sphere. But they're wrong. And also, Ember isn't a disc. This is something that people gets wrong. It's actually, well, let me talk about that later. So yeah. Oh yeah. There's also something that to dissect what makes Ember special a little bit. There are sort of 7 pillars that you can see in the setting compendium. By the way, a lot of this info that I'm talking about is in the game world. So if I quickly jump over to the game world, I can show you that inside the sort of setting compendium, is it Cosmos? No. Yes, there is something in here called the setting introduction. So for all of these topics, if you have the game, for all 7 of these pillars, you can read through exactly what they are. I'm just going to talk about them sort of briefly, but you can read more of the details in the game world. So yes, so the 7 pillars of Ember, this is really why Ember is different maybe from other fantasy settings. You know, like it's not medieval fantasy. This is what I'm talking about. So manifest destinies basically mean manifest deities means that in Ember, gods are real. They walk around among mortals, and everybody knows that they're real. They're not mystical beings that live on other planes. They're not creatures that are unknown. People know who the gods are. There's many followers of deities in Ember. That's what that means. That's what makes Ember very different, I think, to other settings. The second pillar is the singular cosmos. And we'll get into this, but it means that basically the Ember cosmos is a single bubble. It is just one thing. There's no universe. There's no other solar systems. There's no sort of, planes of existence. everything exists within this cosmos, within this bubble. There's no alternate planes of reality, like a fire plane, an elemental plane of fire, or anything like that. That doesn't exist. There is an elemental moon of fire that you can go to. You can physically travel to it, but there's no plane existence. So that's number 2. Number 3, the world within, basically means that, let me scroll down a little bit. It's kind of like a multifaceted, I can't even say that word. It's kind of like you get increasingly zoomed in to, so you have the bubble of the weave that you can see. I should simulate it as well. So you can see the lovely simulation of what the day-night cycle looks like. And then you go down and you have the world, and you have this big world. Then you go down again and you get this thing in the middle called the Heart of Ember. The fourth, am I on 4? The 4th is the history. So history in Ember is ridiculously long, much longer, I think, than other settings. It goes back 2.2 million years, and that's not to say it's like Earth, where you have all the evolution and everything else. There are ancient events and ancient things that happened 1 million plus or 2 million years ago that are like, oh, those things happened? Okay, cool. And the other one is, yeah, well, I'll talk about history more. But yeah, breathtaking scale is the 5th, so everything is bigger, everything is weird. You can see moons in the sky, and you can see big ancient structures of ancient civilizations. There's a lot of, huge scale. 6 is new horrors, so stuff like Undeath and the Abyss and horrible, gribbly monsters are quite recent to the Ember cosmos in sort of historical terms. So 2.5 years ago, during the Shattering, which is this massive cataclysmic event that sort of has set up many of the stories that we're telling today, during the Shattering, the Abyss flooded into the world and caused untold chaos. And the 7th and final, and perhaps most important, is that magic is everywhere. There are little magical motes floating through the air. There are, wizards and sorcerers and people with little abilities that can do things. Farmers can sometimes use like little bits of magic, or they have magical tools, or they can do things. They know somebody that can use magic. Magic is everywhere in Ember. It's very, very common. Question: would there be lore and story added to the continents on the? You mean the inner realms? Yes. Eventually, although not probably for the scope of the current story. But there's lots of cool stuff going on there. They do have their own articles that are written, so you can get a better in-depth look on the inner realms of Luxarium, Primordus, and Signara in the setting compendium. They give you a bit of detail, which is nice. So that's kind of like the 7 pillars of Ember. What makes it really cool, what makes it really interesting, what makes it different from other fantasy, I suppose. And what do I have next? Oh yeah, well, I'm already talking about this anyway. So, in the sort of cosmos that we were just talking about with the whole Theia thing, there's a couple of things to talk about here in terms of what these things are. So this is like the glowy barrier around the edge is called the weave, and this is like the bubble that protects the cosmos from everything beyond. And what is beyond the weave is just called the abyss, and it's very bad. It's very eldritch and alien and not part of the cosmos. It is bleh, horrible, incredibly evil, and it's just horrible. But within the cosmos, lots of interesting things going on. You have the space inside the cosmos, which is called the Sea of Stars. Then you have on the surface of the inner surface of the weave these three massive realms called the inner realms, which are Primordis, Luxarum, and Signara. Primordis is the realm of the Caeora and the Fae, these cat-like creatures. It's very red, ancient primordial woodlands, trickery, shadows, that kind of thing. Internally, I kind of refer to it as the realm of shadows as well, so it's kind of like the realm of shadows. Then you have Luxarum, which is the world of light, or the realm of light. This is the home of the Teraphim. These, I was about to say angelic, but they're not angelic at all. These creatures are terrible, warlike, aggressive, pretty horrible. But they are creatures of light, and they kind of flip the idea of like angels on their head, and the sort of Teraphim are constantly at war with each other. So Luxarum is also referred to sometimes as the realm of eternal war, or the realm of light. And people on the surface, like the mortals, where the game's taking place, they don't really know what's going on Luxarum. So some people have a better opinion of the Teraphim than the reality would suggest. But yeah, they're pretty, interesting creatures. In fact, all of the creatures from the inner realms are pretty, well, I wouldn't say they're exactly, they don't exactly have Ember's best interests in mind, let's just say that. And then the final realm is the realm of Signara, which is kind of like, well, the other name for that is kind of like the realm of darkness. And it is the home of the Deimos and of fiends. So fiends in Ember are quite different. They're not universally evil. Signara is not hell, but they are fiendish. And they're obsessed with collecting knowledge. Question, which direction is gravity on the underside of the disk? Okay, so... how do I explain this? I have a different slide for this, which I'll quickly show you. This is the next slide. I'll come back to the other one. But this is one of the slides where the sort of, imagine this is something that Caeora has drawn that's in the setting compendium within the actual world. So Caeora does all these notes and writes in her little book and records history. And this is something that she's sort of drawn as a kind of in-world explanation about the world and the broken tower and everything like that. So this image right here, this, which I guess I should highlight, this is the world of Ember on its side. And on the surface, you have the broken tower, you have Ordain, where the game takes place, but then beneath that you have massive sections of the pathways, you have all of these things, and in the middle you have the Heart of Ember. The Heart of Ember is right in the middle here. So if you dug a tunnel down, you would reach the Heart of Ember. Now, one of the things that the Heart of Ember does, to answer your question about gravity, it produces something called a gravitational line or a gravitational disk. So this disk pulls people on the surface down to the middle, and it becomes heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier as it gets closer to the gravitational line. But then, as you get close to it, you would, if you're actually on the line, it kind of cancels itself out a little bit. So almost like it doesn't exist. So you start sort of like, there's weird gravitational anomalies. It kind of like, you can kind of fluctuate, you can bounce up and down, or you can get thrown off into weird directions sometimes. But then if you pass through it and you're trying to travel to the other side of Ember, the disk would kind of flip. So if you're on the underside of Ember, you would have gravity. You'd be able to stand just the same way as you do on the surface. Great question though. Took me a while to work that one out when I was doing the world building. And yes, the official name for it, well, I wouldn't say it's the official name for it, but the internal name for the world is the burger patty. Question, how is the abyss created? Do they come from outside the bubble? I mean, the abyss itself is older than the Ember cosmos, so we'll talk about history later on. But generally speaking, the abyss is the eternal evil, and the cosmos spawned from it. Question, can you get a good burger on the patty? Yes! I love food. I used to be a chef, so there's loads of amazing recipes planned for the gathering and crafting system. So you can imagine that there's going to be a lot of really good burgers. I imagine the Weirds would be really good at making burgers. Anyway, back to the cosmos a little bit. So you have the 3 inner realms that I talked about, and then you have the 6 elemental moons. So these are like these, if we go back to the thing, to the little rotational... Is that rotating? Anyway, so you can see that there are these 6 moons that are rotating around these orbits, and these 6 elemental moons are for fire, water, earth, air, order, and chaos. Now they have different names and different sort of flavors a little bit, but they're the base. That's at base what they are. And all of them have different effects on the world, and they do interesting things. And they're also home to elementals of that type, so fire elementals and water elementals and earth elementals and things like that. So these are kind of our stand-ins for, I guess, the elemental planes in a way. Should go backwards. Oh yes, and you also have a sun. There is a sun in Ember, so the sun sort of goes around like this, and it has a very stable orbit. So it goes across the world and then under, and it lights up the undersurface, and then it goes back and it lights up the bottom, and it keeps going round and around. But actually, the sun is not a ball of plasma. The sun is actually a deity. Yeah, it's a whole thing. The sun is called, she's called Lantir, and she is an elder goddess. And I'll talk about gods later, but she's actually, it's not a big ball of fire. She's actually she's weird. And then you have the burger patty itself in the middle. And in the middle of the burger patty is the heart of Ember, which, from a cosmological world-building perspective, is the thing that created the whole cosmos. Reminds me of Spelljammer. Question, does anyone live on the underside? Yes, there are quite a lot of things going on the underside. The only thing I'll say about that at this point in the world building, because even I haven't developed it very, very much, although I do have notes, is that the ancestry, I'll call it an ancestry, maybe creature is a better name. The Zaxine come from the underside. Question, I see water falling off the surface of Ember. What happens to the water? Does it stick to the line or dissipate over time? Yeah, so it sort of sticks to the line a little bit. If we go back to the world, imagine that the water is kind of flowing off here. When it gets to the there are sort of gaps and tunnels and entryways into the pathways here on the sort of around the edges of the burger patty. So the water sort of flows off and kind of gets sucked back in, and it travels back through and into the pathways and then up out into Ember's oceans. So at the bottom of a lot of the Ember oceans, even some internal, like big lakes and things like that, there are these big water, basically volcanoes, that are sort of pumping the water back. So it's a continuous sort of cycle. And that happens on the underside as well. So the underside has oceans that sort of flow. So it all kind of recirculates. Recirculates? I'm not sure if that's a word. But yeah, that's how it works. Question. If the Lord World goes back millions of years, how far back does the current history stretch back? Or is it the unveiling age of beasts the real beginning? This is a really good question that I will talk about when I'm talking about history later on. But you could imagine that the pertinent history of the world, the history that maybe you want to care about the most as a player or as a DM at this point, because a lot of it is foundational going back further than that, but a lot of the really ancient stuff happened before the Shattering. So this was the period during the Age of the Tower, and then the Age of the Beasts, and the Dawn Age. All of this is very ancient history. Like it's so sort of vast and so far back that stuff doesn't really... I mean, it has a big effect, but you don't really need to know it as a player. Everything after the Shattering, though, that's the kind of stuff that really starts to have an impact on the present day. The rise of the human kingdoms, you know, all of the current political drama, the current sort of issues and problems that happened because of the Shattering, with undead and the abyss and everything going on. So if you're curious about going back even further before the Shattering, there's lots of good stuff that I've written about in the Setting Compendium, but the heart of the story and what we're telling in Ember, the game, is kind of the post-Shattering era. Lantir, yes, is the name of the goddess, the sun. Is the sun asleep? Does she float about? She's not asleep. No, she's very aware. She's very she's able to empower people on the surface of Ember with her power. She can, because she's an elder goddess, which I'll get into in a bit. I keep saying I'll get into in a bit. The stream's going to last for 3-4 hours. Don't worry. Is the sun? She's very aware, and she can empower her followers. She can affect the world and do divine intervention. But effectively, she is floating about. She's actually sentient enough to understand that her orbit needs to be stable. She's, well, I say sentient enough. I mean, she is incredibly aware. She's very sentient and sapient. She knows that having a stable orbit is the best thing for the world of Ember to remain a stable environment for life. Yes, thank you for the correct spelling of Lantir. Since Ember is flat, how does the horizon line work? Yeah, interestingly, this is one of the big things about the setting that is hard for us to imagine as humans living on planet Earth. But the horizon line on Ember is literally, you can see all the way out. Now, obviously, there's atmospheric color and haze, so it's very unlikely that you'll be able to see that far, but you can see some vast distances, even though they're very, very far away. One of the things that's almost unmissable if you're looking around, you know, in Ember, you're standing on the surface of Ember and looking around, is the Broken Tower. This massive, huge tower built by magic by the Adir, the Sunfire Empire at the end of the Age of the Tower, which caused the Shattering. It's still there, it's still broken, it's literally colossal, resting on the horizon. You can see it from anywhere on Ember. So even if you're in Atirica, around Ordain, you know, if you're in Durin, if you're in Caeora, you know, if you just look this way, you're going to see this colossal broken tower. Pretty much exactly what you see here, you're going to see that on the horizon, filling a pretty big portion of the horizon. So it's pretty overwhelming, and it's a constant reminder that the Shattering happened, which people on Ember are quite salty about. Um, I feel like I'm watching people engage with Tolkien. Oh, thank you. Question: why does it look like there are two broken towers on a patty, and why did Leora erase it? um, yeah, I can't really answer that question because that's not it's not in the setting compendium yet. That's only in my notes. But there is a. I'm not going to say any more about that. Yeah, I'm not going to say any more about that. Wait, the game world is flat? Yes, completely flat. Well, I mean, it's not completely flat. I mean, there's mountains and there's oceans and there's hills and there's massive towering mountains. Many of the mountains in Ember are many times larger than the Himalayas or Mount Everest. So they are truly massive mountains. So you get scale and everything looking around you. But then the Broken Tower itself is many times larger than those mountains. You don't need a compass, exactly. There's always a reference to the Broken Tower, unless you're in a storm or there's clouds or fog or anything like that. If my buddy stands in Ordain and I stand in Caeora, I can't see him. Round Emberers. How big is the diameter of the disc? I wonder how big in meters is this tower. Do you know, I actually worked that out to some detail a long time ago. We switch over. Is it switch screens? Yeah, we switch over to the world map. So this is the current world map as it's drawn out. So we have. Oh, I don't think I've saved it anywhere. You could probably work this out if you wanted to. Maybe I should try and make a better effort to work this out in the future. But this is the mega region. So this is the playable area for the Ember game inside this red box. So inside this red box is the whole mega region. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 by 4 of the squares of the world. So as you can see, it's a relatively tiny. I mean, it's still a massive mega region. It's bigger than any other tabletop RPG space that you probably ever played in. That's fully visualized and seamless, but it's quite small. I think Ember is a little smaller than an Earth in terms of diameter. Question: is the tower an effective version of North? No, actually, people consider North and South to be the land tier. How to explain this? This is a temperature map of the world that I've created, and this is Lantir going across this way, and she always sort of goes horizontally across the world. So the opposite vertical, people consider that to be north and that to be south. At least in Atirika, anyway, which is where most of our action takes place. Most people assume that, this is north and this is south because of the sun. I'm slightly losing track of where my slides are. Which is perfectly fine. Thank you so much for all the amazing questions, by the way. I love getting off topic. Just like, yes, delicious, delicious questions. But we're covering a lot of the stuff that's on this sheet, which is the current sheet, so keep them coming. When you would it make sense then that people would use the tower for orientation rather than the sun, stars, and other usual methods? Yes, they do. In fact, it's very common to use the broken tower as a thing. Oh yeah, I helped it. But yes, it's very common. Question: when you were conceptualizing Ember, what were the core concepts that you wanted to include while designing the world, history, and lore for it, and what stayed was let go during your process? Well, thank you. That's a really cool question. Growing up, I read a lot of fantasy fiction, and reading a lot of fantasy fiction, I began to notice tropes and patterns. And when I sort of imagined myself writing my own stories and creating a world, I thought to myself, well, I really want to create a setting that is different in some ways. One of the things that always bothered me about a lot of fantasy fiction was the fact that deities were sort of these, similar to how we imagine deities in our real world. They're like these things in the sky, you know, these entities in the sky, and they're very mysterious and nebulous, and they live in the heavens, and you know, you have deities in these other places that you can't see or visualize, and sometimes they speak to you and sometimes they don't. Even in fantasy, it was always quite like, are these entities real, or are they sort of, what are they? And obviously some fiction did this better, where they had actual like people, but they've always felt very off and you know, hard to understand, mysterious. And I wanted for Ember specifically, and this is one of the things that I really pushed for, and I was really sort of a central pillar of the world building, was that deities in Ember are physical creatures and people that live among the ordinary humans and other ancestries in the world. They live among them, they rule them, they hide from them, they're here and they interact. You can go and visit your god in a temple somewhere if they live in a temple. That was a big one. And the other one was, I really wanted a world that felt different immediately. And this is a really funny story, by the way, and completely 100% true, completely true. The original concept for the Heart of Ember and the bubble, the weave, I had a dream about. And I woke up in the middle of the night dreaming about this concept for a world, and I scribbled it down on a whiteboard, and I went back to sleep. And then I woke up the next day, and yeah, I started writing notes about like, oh yeah, it's this like cool orb thing in the middle, and it created the world, and it's got this bubble that protects it. I just thought that was really neat. So that was another core concept that I really wanted to build Ember around. It would be very interesting to see the Sun Tower shadow on the world map. That would be really cool. But then it might need to do like a 3D model where it's like not angled. Question: any plans for water-dwelling ancestries? There is a water-dwelling ancestry. One of the they're not playable, but they're called the Caeora, and yes, the Caeora are, you know, one of the things that we've done in the world, because we've been building Ember for a long time, we've actually illustrated more of it now than we had even a year ago or 2 years ago. So we have a Caeora character in the game world. They're very rare. They don't show up very often. But this is a Caeora called Evis Brightstone. And yeah, they live in the deep underwater places of Ember. The world of Ember specifically. But yeah, thank you for that question. There is one. What have we got next? Okay. So, talking about deities and talking about why they're cool, I'm going to talk about the deities of Ember. Oh dear. So, deities in Ember come in 4 different types. There are the Elder Gods. The Elder Gods are these entities that came about during creation itself. They are created or were created by these massive random fluctuations of power from the heart of Ember, which is the middle of the world, and they are fundamental to the setting. They encapsulate sort of these ideas like souls, creation, magic, fate. The sun, Lantir, is an elder goddess, which is technically her domain is energy. So you have these, they are fundamental to the setting. Then you have shard gods. Shard gods are the sort of ascendant deities, which are created by touching a heart crystal or communing with a heart crystal in the world. So these are mortals that have become gods. So shard gods are quite common. There's actually hundreds of them in the world currently in the present age, and there were even more in the past. So there's a lot of shard gods, but they're far weaker than elder gods. Even though they're still considered gods, they can grant power to worshippers and everything like that. They are still, weaker. Then the third is wild gods. Wild gods is actually a recent sort of clarification of the lore, because I didn't work out the name, I didn't work out exactly what they were and how they worked until about 6 months ago. But wild gods are entities that are static. They've sort of stayed in an area, a natural area of the world for a long enough time that they've absorbed magic and life force from the heart of Ember and have become immortal sort of entities that take on godlike traits. So these are like the wild gods of the wilderness and sort of distant areas. Some live in the pathways or like in distant mountaintops or deep in forests and things like that. But yeah, wild gods, very cool. Not many of them in the lore currently, but I want to expand on that concept a little bit more. And then we will talk about this more, of course, but then you have outer gods, and outer gods are entities of the abyss. They are the alien, horrific creatures of nightmares, basically. They are horror personified, and they are not nice. I may talk about them more later, or if anyone has any questions about them, please do. They're all the ones that I've currently written in the lore do have full articles written about them. Yeah, they're all pretty nasty. And they are real as well. They're not like figments. They actually exist, which is terrifying for the people on Ember, I'm sure. Question: if the main world is flat, but the other moons and sun are spherical, is there a round worlder cult group? Yes, there is. There are people in the world that believe that they live on a round world, but most people think that they're not correct. But there are people that think that, yes. Question: I remember reading that the age and quality of a heart crystal determines the strength of the shard god. I'm gonna take a pin in that question because I'm going to talk about shard gods just after this section. But that's a good question, and yeah, I'll talk about it. Tell Evis I love her. Yes, she was so good. That portrait, that character was illustrated by Tari, one of our amazing character illustrators, artists. And it is one of the most fantastic illustrations that we have. Question: how do seasons work in Ember? Does Lantis slowly adjust their orbit over time or change their output? Yes! That is exactly what happens. So, in the game world, if you have a little look on... If we switch over, you can see at the top here, I've got... Can you just about see the little, yeah, you can see the calendar at the top. I was about to zoom in then, but I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You can see this calendar at the top, and there's actually a season bar that goes across. And inside the setting compendium, under history currently, or it might need somewhere else, there's actually a list of the seasons. So there are 6 seasons in Ember, and these seasons are basically because, exactly what you say, Lantir has an effect, has a deliberate understanding of adjusting her output and her position slightly, and so you get these different seasons. But also, more importantly, I think one of the things that affects these seasons more than Lantir, and obviously Lantir is sort of aware of this, is that the inner realms that go around the outer edge of the weave, the inner realms are actually rotating around the weave, and they're rotating around the same axis that, or same orbit that Lantir is, pretty much, although they do fluctuate a bit. They actually influence the seasons quite radically. So when Luxarum, so I think it's the year begins with Primordus, with the seeding and the blooming. So you kind of get a spring season from Primordus, and then it comes round, and it's Luxarum, the realm of light. You get the summer with the steeding and the gleaning, and then after Luxarum sort of goes round, then you get Signara, the realm of darkness, and that's when you get winters. Pay your artists more; they are stunning. I will tell them that. Yeah, they'll be pleased to hear that. What does it mean to be a follower of an elder god? Yeah, it's a good question. Elder gods are quite different to shard gods in some ways. They're a little less personal. So, in every one of these articles for the sort of elder gods, I suppose, or all gods, like if we go into Venave, the Weaver, the goddess of fate and prophecy, I'll show you her in a little bit more detail here. Venave actually is a pretty interesting deity to follow, because she is not interested really in talking to mortals, and when she does talk to mortals, she talks in riddles, and her sentences can be very confusing. So it's very difficult to be a follower of Venave. As a player, if you wanted to roleplay that, you absolutely can, but she's a little less present as something like a wild god, and definitely like a shard god, because shard gods are like people. They want to communicate with their followers. They want people's worship, or some of them do anyway. So they're very, very different people to sort of worship. With multiple moons present, what are the tidal differences, if any, that you would envision? Or you have for the world? Really very interested to see the maritime part of Ember, just like some of the people mentioned. Yeah, so there are some interesting things going on with gravity. Interestingly enough, gravity exists on the elemental moons in the same way. How do I say this without causing Andrew to have a heart attack? Gravity doesn't work the same in Ember as it does in the real world. Gravity itself, I guess maybe we should call it a different name. I currently still call it gravity, but it works differently. The gravitational disk is created by the heart of Ember, and there are these things that I won't get into in the elemental moons and the inner realms that also cause a gravitational effect. So you can stand on the moons and stand on the inner realms, but they're not the same as they are in the real world. So you know how we get the moon influences our tides? It doesn't quite work the same way. And so you get these quite odd, interesting sort of fluctuations and things as they're moving around. You could imagine that even though there are lots of different moons and they're a lot closer, they don't have an extreme effect on the tides, where the wild gods are. Question, do all the cultures of Ember share the same calendar and measurement? No, they don't. No, they do not indeed. Sometimes it's better for the game for us to be like, okay, we're using Ordani timekeeping, we're using the kind of Arctus Plateau method of currency and understanding of the world. But no, that's not the case. There's lots of different things going on. Oh yeah, so back to deities. So this is kind of like the overall sort of how deities work. Unlike in other settings and other sort of fiction, deities in Ember are they don't require worship. They do not require followers. They have their own internal power that they had at their ascension or their birth or their however they became a deity, and that doesn't change. Or at least it kind of changes, because when they give their power to their followers, their power does go down a little bit. So fractionally, like 0.00 something, but it does have an effect. So the power does change, but it doesn't actually increase. Their followers don't give them more power. Yeah, okay. Let's move on to elders. So, talking a little bit more about elder gods. Elder gods are very, 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 very powerful. There are only 5 currently in the lore. There was a... I'm not going to go into that. I was like, yeah, there are... No, not going into that. People who have read the Setting Compendium probably know that there are some other elder gods. There were 7 in the past, but there are 5 in the present day. Woo! So there's just 5 to talk about here. We have Ayla, who's considered the goddess of creation. We have Spectra, who's considered the goddess of magic. Venave, the goddess of fate. Lantir, the sun. And Sockets, the god of the soul, or souls. And they are cosmic, fundamental things, but they have physical bodies. Every single elder god has a physical body. They're not intangible entities. They can also mess with souls directly, unlike any of the other gods, so they can take a soul and bring it somewhere, and yeah, they can do interesting things with souls. And according to the history, which if you have a question about that, I can answer, kind of, but they can be killed. Or not. Perhaps they can. There is an example in the lore where there's an elder god that has died. Maybe. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not going to talk about that anymore. If you have a question, let me know. Shard gods are probably the most interesting gods, though. So when we're talking about Ember, we're talking about the game world of Ember, you will be going through the game world, you will be playing and doing things and solving mysteries and doing all these. You will meet shard gods. There are shard gods in the game world. In fact, all the deities on this screen are in the game world. You will meet them and you can do things and you can interact with them. But they are all ascended mortals. That's very important. They became gods, shard gods, by touching a heart crystal and communing with it and absorbing its power. Now, a heart crystal is a small, or not small, it's quite a big shard of crystal energy that's broken off or formed on by the heart of Ember in the middle of the world, and it's kind of traveled throughout the pathways, the underground, and it's kind of been resting in a cave somewhere for hundreds of thousands of years, and then a mortal explorer will come along, touch the heart crystal and be like, I'm going to become a shard god now, and then they become a shard god. And Rexray asked this question earlier, which I'll answer now, but the age, and I would say the age is more important than the quality. The age of a heart crystal is very important. If it's a really old heart crystal, that's been embedded in the world since the creation. It's going to be infinitely more, well, I wouldn't say infinitely, many times more powerful than a heart crystal that has been produced today. And that is because the Heart of Ember, as a fundamental force of creation, has over time been getting weaker. Which, when you think about it, is horrifically, cataclysmically bad for the world. But yeah, we don't really talk about that. The Heart of Ember is slowly getting less powerful. Not great. Shard gods are different as well from elder gods because they're not as powerful. Although they can hear prayers and they can, they have many followers. They're a little bit more local, so they're not world spanning or cosmos spanning. Shard gods are normally confined to regions or local or like regional pantheons. They're not. They probably can't communicate or intervene, like do divine intervention to somebody half a world away. They just don't have that kind of oomph that the elder god can. And many shard gods have died throughout the history of Ember. So even though they are deities, what we classify as deities, they can absolutely be killed. And many have died over the course of history. Okay, cool. So, next thing I want to talk about is Ember's ancestries. So when you're playing in the game, or when you're looking through the world building, and you're sort of wondering, oh, what makes Ember special? There are ancestries, all created for the setting that makes the Ember setting unique, and there are plenty of amazing sort of ancestries for players to choose from and make the world feel, great. And this chart, which I made, this kind of like tree of the ancestries I made years ago, and only this week did I be like, okay, I'm going to do a stream about Ember lore. I remember that old sort of ancestry tree that I made. I'm going to turn that into a sort of Caeora sheet. So it makes it clear like where all of these ancestries came from, their relationships, maybe with their sort of, whatever. This is that. As you can see, one of the really interesting things about this is that a lot of the ancestries came from a progenitor ancestry called the Jan. The Jan are very important from a historical perspective. They don't come up as much in the game world currently for our current storytelling, but a lot of our ancestries come from the Jan. And just to be clear, when we're talking about these Ember ancestries, what I'm describing is a, sentient, sapient species that exists within the Ember cosmos. Some of them are obviously humanoid, some of them are definitely not. Some of them are very monstrous, but they are sapient creatures. And many of these have different origins as well. Some of them have come about through the creation of a deity, and some of them have come about through the natural processes of the Heart of Ember. But there are how many? I don't know how many ancestries we have. There are 16 ancestries in Ember that are playable, and I'll talk about them quite briefly here. So on the right here, can you see that? Yeah, you can. On the right here, you can see that we've got Altera. Altera are metallic human. They came from humans, and they are sort of these. They have metallic skin. In fact, They're not on this thing. Oh, they are on this thing. Okay. I was like, Altera isn't on here. Crap. No, they come from. They were created by the influence of Celestials, by the Terraform. Although they are base humans, and they can have these weird transformation powers because they have metallic blood as well. I'm just going to speed through these. A lot of these are in the setting compendium. They're very interesting, but I don't. I could do a whole stream on our ancestries. Then you have the Ashka, who are sort of reptilian, snake-like. They definitely have that kind of snake feel, although they're a little bit more aquatic. So you can imagine they're like sea snakes, in a way. Oh. Then we have the Korak. So the Korak are actually based on Leviathans, which in Ember are these colossal, hulking, ancient creatures from the Age of Beasts, and sort of a more humanoid shape. So they're very sort of elementally like Earth-like, but also very natural creatures, primal creatures. Then you have the Drakon. The Drakon are a combination of dragons and humans that are the youngest ancestry in Ember. So Drakon have only been around for 72 years. The oldest Drakon in the world currently is 72 years old. So I'm just going to look back at chat. Look, I love this font, but I need to edit this font because the M's and the N's are very confusing. I know it's a problem. I'll fix it. Don't worry. But I love the font because it kind of looks like Leora is kind of writing, scribbling the M's and N's. And Leora she's old. Maybe this is how they used to write it. Give her a break. But I will change it. I know I need to change it. It's just I need to edit the font itself. But yes, so Drakon are a thing. Then you have the Fej, and the Fej are our fiery ancestry. They have like this internal fire. They don't have organs the same way we do. They have this kind of like, fiery blood and this inner core. Then we have humans. Humans in Ember are slightly different. They have the same shape as what we would consider humans. They are humans. But they are internally slightly different, and their origin is slightly interesting as well. And then we have our little Holgren. So Holgren are like living statues that are imbued with life force. So they are living stone. They can slow. They're like internally we call them the world's slowest shapeshifters, because they can very, very slowly change their physical forms. So they can, change their hairstyle or change their facial features or change genders or whatever. But it takes them months or years to change their stone sort of like forms and colors and things like that. And although you can't see any on Tauric here, they can incorporate like gems and things into their skin as well. Then we have the Keth. these little gremlin, goblin-like creatures that are terrifying if you were to meet one. So Keth are they come from giants, but they're very small, and they have these massive wide jaws that open up to reveal these very like sharp sort of teeth. I don't know why the giants made them like that. That's not true. I know why the giants made them like that, but the lore doesn't say it in the game world currently. But they have a very sort of like horrifying appearance when they open their mouths. When they've got their mouths closed, you can't really tell, but they're kind of like little creepy things. Then you have the Kiska. And the Kiska are based on some of the Caeora and the Fae from Primordus. So they have sort of cat-like features, they have this incredibly exuberant hair, sort of glowing roots that come down, they're very magical creatures. Then you have the Caeora. Now the Caeora are the direct sort of descendants of our giants. So there are still giants around, although not many of them left in Ember, but the Caeora are their sort of smaller ancestries. They're still among the tallest and sort of like of our ancestries, but they are sort of based on our sort of giant template. Then you have the Nere. Nere have sort of these droopy ears and this sort of magic sort of patterned skin that kind of flows across different patterns across their bodies. And they're really cool. They have very sort of strange eyes as well that enable them to see magic. And then you have the Signborn, and these are based on our fiends, or rather they sort of come from our fiends as a sort of origination. And they have 4 arms. They have tiny little thin horns as well, and little thin tails. And much like the fiends and the Deimos, they have multiple arms. So they have, but those arms are kind of insubstantial, sort of glowing slightly. And it's, yeah. Then we have our smallest ancestry. Our smallest ancestry are the Thornlings. Thornlings are probably my second favorite ancestry in the game. They are these small little plant creatures, and they have these big eyes, and they have all different sort of like colored hair and things. This little Thornling, Leaf, is somebody you meet very early on in the game, and Leaf is a little menace, which I personally find very charming. Then we have our Wirrun. Our Wirrun are from the north. They are these hunters. They're very sort of, I suppose, bestial as well. They're adapted to survive in the cold north. They're furred, very good at sort of surviving the cold. Then we have our Vrinhar. Our Vrinhar are these kind of medium build, slightly shorter than humans, but they're very bulky, and they have a kind of they're also great survivalists, and incredibly long-lived as well. So a Vrinhar can live up to maybe 800 years old, so very, very ancient. Their culture, the Oaken, is also like the oldest continuous culture in Ember. So they have very long memories. And finally, the last playable ancestry is the Zeph. And the Zeph are masked humanoids. Their bodies are elemental-like, and their masks are these physical things, but the masks themselves contain the sort of the soul of the Zeph. So they're very, very strange magical beings. Question. I'm going to go back a step because I've got some questions from when I was talking about deities. What happens when a shard god dies? Does the power they absorbed dissipate, or can it be transferred somewhere? For example, a mortal steals the power of a shard god. So a mortal can't steal the power of a shard god. There are many examples in history where killing a shard god actually results in a very big explosion. Theoretically, I'm not going to say never, there's no examples of this in the lore, but you could, if somehow you're able to contain that power, you could capture the energy, but it's very, very hard. And also, as soon as the shard god dies, that energy sort of goes back into the heart of Ember directly, so it will go back into the where the power came from, basically. Question: are old ancestries like the Varak extinct following the fall of the Vaznor? I see a question mark next to them. Yeah, so that's interesting. There are some... How do I answer this? Caeora, who's writing this, sheet has written some notes about these ancestries. She's written some of the text, and she's written about sort of what she believes is going on with them. Yeah, I'm not going to answer anything else than that. She's written extinct question mark. She doesn't know. Oh, looks like the original name was Amber. So, funnily enough, Ember, as the setting and the game, is a little bit like Amber, and it's certainly got some deep connections to the creation of like how I thought. There were times when I was playing with Amber being the name of the setting and Ember being the name of the game, and all of that kind of stuff. But in this specific context for this sheet, what that name means, the Amber Historiae, this is the book. The Amber Historiae is the book that Leora is writing in. So she has this tome, like this magical tome that she writes all of her notes on, that she collects over her long life, and collects all. Altera, based. Korak, also based. Question: what do the shard and elder god symbols actually mean in that legend? So that's a good question. So in the context of this specific sheet, this is Leora's understanding of how these ancestries were created. So for all of these ancestries, there is a history of how they were made. So for example, from Jan to human, Leora thinks that it was a natural alteration. Human to Drakon, so how the Drakons were created, Leora believes that an elder god was responsible. For the Zeph, it was a shard god that was responsible. Leora is not exactly the most reliable narrator, but I would say about 90% of these are factually correct, and there's a few mistakes that she's made. Seeing all these spikes, can Drakon hug without injury? No. They have to be very delicate with their hugs. That's quite sad, although most of them don't have spikes on their... It's more on their shoulders, and yeah, it would, yeah. Human is extinct. No, they're not. How old is Anchorist? Anchorist is 72 years old. Oh no, you need to move the Thornling? Can't see it because... Oh no, you didn't see Leaf? I love Leaf. Sorry, here's Leaf. I talk about the Thornlings. That's the little Thornling character. Actually, that's a terrible place to put them. Let's put them over there. Who is the dragon lady among the deities? That is Alar, who is considered the elder goddess of creation, although she has a few different titles and monikers and what people believe she is responsible for. But yeah, so that's all our ancestries. That's all the playable ones anyway. Now there are a few more on here that people will be like, oh, okay, so that's Caeora from the Inner Realms, the Deimos, the Teraphim, you know, those are from the Inner Realms. Then you have things like Leviathans on there, which have different levels of sapience. You've also got stuff on there that's not playable. There are a few on here like the Caro that aren't playable, Trolls, the Sorvok, the Zaxine, who I love. Dragons, can't play a dragon in Ember. But yeah, this is kind of how everything works together. And this will go in the game world and go in Ancestries once I fix the font. I need to fix the font. But then this sheet will go into the Ember game world. So the next thing that I want to talk about, switching tacks a little bit, is cultures. So one of the last topics that I'll talk about after this is history, which is great. Like, I love the history, but I think it's really important when we're talking about the inner setting to talk about cultures, because when you look at the game world and you look at the world map and you look at the current present age of Ember, if you're exploring that world, the cultures are what brings everything to life. These are separate sort of nations and kingdoms and, ancestry based, like the Fej and the Lumak, who are older than the Ordani and the Arcturians, and then, some of them are at war, some are, living peacefully, trading, or everything like that. There's individual history for the cultures and everything, including languages and traditions, blah 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 blah, blah, everything. They're amazing, and I think if you really want to get stuck into Ember and you want to and you love a particular culture, I think that is a really good window into how to understand what the setting is. So one of the things that we've done in the game world that I'll briefly talk about is, if we go back, get out of here, Vinave. If you look in the culture journal page, which has a lot more information than I'm talking about here about cultures, you can see that there are actually 4 different categories of culture. And these are kind of based on the game that we're currently building. So these categories don't necessarily exist in an in-world perspective, but they exist from our perspective as people reading it. So if it's prominent culture, it means that it's around the Arctis Plateau, or connected with intimately by trade or relationship with Ordain. The primary culture, I would say, for the game world is Ordain, and the whole Ordani politics and everything that's going on. And I'll talk about each of these in a second, including Ordain and the Ordani. But then you have more distant cultures. These include like the Striders or the Kelmesians or the Kessians. These are distant, very disconnected from Ordain, but people can still come from that. You might still get the odd sort of NPC, or a player might technically convince a GM that they want to be playable, and maybe eventually we as the developers will develop playable cultures for regional. But then you have distant, and distant is these cultures that are almost completely unknown to Ordain and the Arctis Plateau. So these are like the Ward Call or the Phycos that live in the far, far north. And if we look on the world map, if we go back to the world map, there are actually more cultures here that I know about and have notes on that aren't even in the setting compendium yet. So these are things like the Scutari over here. These are so distant to Ordain that nobody really has any knowledge of. You're not going to get an NPC from the Scutari or the Tolvork or Tharp. You're not going to get from the Wind Bear or the Vartic over here. But these are definitely outliers that may eventually or will eventually become part of the setting compendium. Troll no playable. No, trolls are not playable. Trolls are very different to, or very distant to Ordain anyway, so they're completely off into the north of the world. Maybe one day. Although trolls are maybe not. They're very, very horrible in Ember. And yeah, quite different to D&D trolls anyway. Question. Is there a rationale behind the name Drakon? Beyond it sounds close to dragon. Like, is it from another language? Else, why don't people just say Dragonkin or something similar? That was actually a name given to them by Alar. So if you read through one of the history articles about the creation of the Drakon. Bearing in mind it was only 72 years ago. So this was something that, you know, incredibly, incredibly recent. People know about it. People have recorded it. People even alive today in Ordain have heard of the Knight of Swords, perhaps. And one of our one of our NPCs that the playable characters in the world can interact with is a Drakon that was created or came from the Knight of Swords. And in that article, which I've written about the Knight of Swords, the Drakon are basically were created from and by Ayla, the elder goddess, and she gave them the name Drakon when she created them. The reason she did that has some influence on the name, but she basically tried to fix the mistake that she made when she created dragons 2,500 years ago, and she was trying to create a counterbalance. Soulbound and Asta seem interesting. Yes, so both of these are not technically ancestries. Soulbound is something that happens to you when you die, or potentially can happen to you when you die. And Asta is kind of like a, from a gameplay standpoint, we always call this like an affix. It's a kind of a random mutation or a random alteration of a character's physiology that creates sort of wings or feathers or, spikes or scales. It can happen at birth. So it kind of gives players... Asta was a really interesting sort of thing that we developed, or that I developed, to allow somebody to play anything that they wanted in Ember. You can play something from even another setting in Ember, and you can just call them Asta. How many chapters are planned again? 6. There are 6 chapters. We've currently finished 1, 2, 3, a D&D version anyway, or with the D&D system, and we're working on chapter 4 right now. We're doing a lot of planning for chapter 4 right now, and we're currently writing the first side quest in chapter 4 right now. Question. I took a sneaky peek at the player options and saw a number of cultures that aren't currently options in character creation. Are these ones planned player options? I'm interested to learn more about the Ward Call and the Kessians. Yes, actually, I think we do have plans to add more. It's not high priority, but I would love to see some of the regionals, or many of the regionals, become playable officially. So Ayla spread the name too. Yes, she did. And the Drakon that were created called themselves Drakon as well, quite proudly, in fact. Oh, I've missed a question. What is the ancestry with the longest and shortest lifespan? I think Agron has answered that question. It is the Brynjar at 800 years. They have about an 800-year lifespan. And Thornlings don't live very long, between 60 to 90 years. Every other ancestry probably lives, varying rates of that. Even humans live slightly longer than Thornlings. So when is the red square as big as the whole world? 2028? No, about 2038. No, 2048. Gotta give me some time. I'm the only one, for the mega region, I've drawn the whole world map. I'm also drawing the entire mega region on my own. So I'm not signing myself up for that, to draw the whole thing. That would be, well, it would take me a long time. All right. Well, back to cultures. Anyway, probably the most prominent culture that we can talk about in this stream, and perhaps it can't be overstated how important this is for the game, is the Ordani. The Ordani culture is almost exclusively lives in the city of Ordain, maybe a few places outside of it, like the Red Rock Fields and the Isle of Kortos, but they are primarily live in this massive metropolis called Ordain. And they're a really fascinating culture as well, very peaceful, or historically very peaceful. They live in almost total harmony, minus a few wiggles with the Arcturian culture that lives alongside them, or within the Arctis Plateau next to them, which we'll talk about in a second. They're great traders. They love their fashion, so they love to dress in new fabrics and styles, and all Aldani have a sort of like inkling of having their own personal style of clothing and fashion sense. They have a lot of pride in their city, so Ordain itself is very clean and orderly, and in many respects, Ordain is one of the biggest cities in the world. And so it's this massive trading hub. They import loads of different goods and things. They export loads of different goods and things. You can see on the map here on the right that the Ordani have all these trade routes going off to the Oaken and the Kithel and the Weds, the Arcturians and the Caecilians and the Lumek, and even the Teian Empire has recently established an embassy in Ordain. So they have all these connections and stuff. Even Kessians sometimes travel to Ordain, although it takes them a very long time. So Ordain cannot be overstated. It's the main focus of the Ember story as well, so the game world. Ordain is this central hub, beautifully, I was about to say, beautifully illustrated by myself. But no, the image on the left was illustrated by one of our amazing artists, Rita. And then in the game world, I have obviously drawn out the whole beautiful cityscape on the region map itself. So Ordain is fully explorable. You can sort of go around it. It's got all these like hexes where you can sort of go into the Ordinate, or into the Sindarin Temple, or visit the can't remember the name, but yeah, it's all sort of like explorable, and one of the things that I'm very proud of artistically. It's one of my best things I've ever done, I think. But yeah, 2048, only 20 years. Yeah, sure. Just live forever and then I can do it. Question, hot take. This isn't a hot take at all. I can answer this very easily. If the Ember campaign did not take place where it does, which region would you like it to be? No questions asked. I would write a... Well, I would have it take place in the Teian Empire. Although I'm currently writing stories, like novels, short stories and things that take place in the Teian Empire. So if I was making the Ember game in the Teian Empire, I wouldn't have the opportunity. So yeah, I think my third choice would be the Lumek Osirate conflict. So the whole cycles of fire and death between the Lumek and the undead. That would be an amazing place to create a region map. Cool. Well, let's move on to the next culture. So we talked about Ordain, but right next to Ordain are the Arcturians. And the Arcturians are very different to the Ordani. They are practical, rural, agrarian. They have small villages. They have a couple of cities, but they're very small compared to the metropolis of Ordain. They love their sort of, you know, creativity and their traditions. They like nature. They like the harmony of like working with the land. Um, they're an incredibly sort of peaceful society as well. So the fact that the Ordani and the Arcturians live together, that's great. They get on very well. The Ordani love to, to buy Arcturian crafts and things. They find them very special. And you might be wondering, well, hold on a minute. You're making a story for a tabletop RPG around the Arctic Plateau, like Ordain, Peaceful City, the Arcturians, peaceful too. Where's the conflict? Like, what's going on here? Well, let me tell you. Historically, this has been the case. If you played or read through any of the Ember material so far for the story, you'll know that this is not currently the status quo. In fact, the status quo has started changing quite dramatically, and through the gameplay of what we have planned for chapters 1 through 6 of the Ember story, things are not going to be very peaceful for very much longer for the poor Arcturians and Ordani. And I wanted to start off at that point because I thought that it would be fun to really experience a new setting, take a deep breath of like, oh, I've got to absorb all of these new cultures and ancestries and everything, and then it all goes to shit. Third ancestry that I'm going to talk about are the Caecilians. So the Caecilian Republic is quite a young nation that has sort of come about. It came about maybe 3 centuries ago, yeah, it's a pretty interesting sort of maritime culture. Very, very strong navy. They protect the sort of Arcturian, Arctic Plateau, sort of mortal cultures of this side of the world, from the Blood Barons and the Osserate, or the undead over in the Screaming Wastelands that you can see down there on the map. One of the big things about the Caecilians, though, that's very, very interesting if you're interested in this culture, or if you want to play this culture, they hate mages. In fact, they imprison mages. If you're a mage, they will lock you up. But other than that, they're pretty progressive. They're pretty good society. They're the only democracy. Well, it's not a true democracy, but the only democracy in Ember currently. It's quite a new concept for the Ember world. Then we have the Weirds. The Weirds are awesome. They are the monster hunters of the Ember setting. So they love to kill. They go out into the dusk-fled jungles and they hunt monsters, and they bring back their corpse, and they make their clothing, and they make charms, and they're also very antagonistic towards each other as well. So they're not politically unified as like a single nation. They have all these little city-states, and they all fight against one another in these kind of ritualistic, strategic sort of conflicts and wars. And they try to refrain from killing each other because they know that killing each other is probably not as good, or there's no glory in killing another human. There's more glory to be had by killing a monster or a creature in the jungles. So they're pretty good at fighting things. Then we have the Lumek. The Lumek are primarily Fej, as we talked about, this sort of fiery ancestry, and they live across the water, across the Yawning Sea, and they live in the Lumerian homelands. They have been fighting the Osserate to their north for over 1,000 years now. They've been desperately holding back, and this the undead attack in sort of these cycles of fire and death, and so you get these overwhelming assaults on, you know, the Lumek cities every, you know, century or so. And because of that, the Lumek are a fantastically powerful military. They've sort of, their entire culture is based around fighting, and they are led by a shard goddess called Lume, who is their queen and their goddess, who leads the entire culture, their entire nation, against the undead. So far, they haven't been able to eradicate the undead. In fact, they've only really been able to defend against the undead. There have been very few examples where the Lumek have attacked into the Blood Baron territory, but they have held them off, so props to them. Then we have the Kithel. The Kithel are cultists. Yeah, maybe cultist isn't the right word. They worship the night sky and the moons. And they are actually an offshoot of a much older culture that were created by the giants, who now live in these sort of very volcanic, I suppose, caustic hinterlands north of Ordain and the Arctic Plateau. And they don't really build cities. They have these vast spread out villages where they create these farms. They use the sort of the natural minerals of the soil and the volcanic minerals and things to grow huge amounts of food and things like that. And one of the other things that's really important for the Kithel is that they're almost entirely nocturnal. So they are a nocturnal culture. The ancestries are nocturnal. The culture itself believes that the night is better than the day. I'll just pause a little bit before I talk about that one. See if there's any questions. Question, is it safe in Ordain? Yes, absolutely. Ordain, even in the present, right, when you begin the game world, it's a very safe city. There's a couple of rough areas, but it's a very safe city. Again, that's not going to change. That's going to change through gameplay. In fact, it's going to get very, very spicy in Ordain. All was peaceful in Ordain until the Fire Nation attacked. A great reference. Sicilians. No, Caecilians. Question, any forest-dwelling cultures? Yes, there are the Striders, who live in a core bright forest. Oh my god, I have not been streaming this. I've had all these slides where I've been talking about things. I've not been showing the slides. That's a pain. Well, anyway, never mind. This is the Strider culture over here in the core bright forest, so yeah, there's a forest dwelling culture. They're really cool. Yeah, I had slides for all the different things I was just talking about. Oh well, I'll quickly show them. Let's go back. So we have the Arcturians, the Caecilians, where they've got if you see on the map, I'm pointing as if you can see how I'm pointing, but they're sort of protecting the seas against the undead osirate there. The Weirds in the sort of jungles. This is south of Ordain, and then the Lumek, who are sort of south of the Caecilians, and then the Kithel, who are north of Ordain. All of these cultures are what we call prominent cultures because they're all connected through trade to the Arctic Plateau. Question, what is the technological advancement level of most of the cultures? I understand it is a melting pot, but it is looking more high medieval or something else. Yeah, really interesting. Most of the cultures in Ember, from a technological perspective, you would consider it a very strange mix of medieval technology, but with Bronze Age sort of materials. If you think about, let's take Ordain specifically. Ordain has access to iron, but in much smaller amounts, and they have access to things like copper and bronze. So a lot of armor, a lot of weapons, a lot of things are traditionally have been made with bronze. Their technology level is also supplemented by a high degree of magical tools that they import from other cultures and from people, and so you get this kind of strange blending where they haven't needed to advance to a certain point because they have these kind of magic shortcuts. But if you were to think about sort of the overall direction of where the Arctic Plateau is, the Werds, the Kithel, it's a little bit like the Simbad sort of Bronze Age, early Iron Age sort of material technology, but then with elements of medieval sort of understanding. Are you changing slides as you explain this? Yes, I was, but it's okay. I just got to keep better track. Yeah, the Lumek have been fighting for a long time. I love playing a weird character and vaguely justifying all my decisions as following the codes without clarifying to the party. Thanks for that, Caeora. Yes, I love sometimes when I write something and people take that. Yeah, that's good. The words are good. They're going to come up in chapter 4 in a side quest, which is going to be quite exciting. Day man, fighter of the night man. Agricultists, yes. So material sciences have lagged behind other fields in a lot of cultures. I would say in the cultures surrounding Ordain, yes. The Lumek, for example, haven't really advanced their technology because they've been fighting in an eternal war for 1,000 years. So their technology level hasn't really gone anywhere, but they do have an incredibly powerful material technology called Lumaran steel, which is created using magic and the bones of their dead, sort of ritualistic sort of bones and ash of their dead, which is pretty hardcore and terrifying to consider. But yeah, a lot of the other cultures have very sort of specific or very limited or very sort of stagnant technological growth. That is actually not the case for the next culture that I want to talk about, or rather the last culture that I'll talk about. One of the cultures that I am personally very interested in as a writer, world builder, lorekeeper. I have a lot of notes on the Terran Empire. The Terran Empire is only just become relevant to Ordain. There is currently a side quest called Diplomatic Impunity in the game world in Chapter 3, where you meet the Terran character. This Terran character, in fact, Loris Red Fiend Tezran, who is the ambassador to Ordain from the Terran Empire. And the Terran Empire is a very aggressive, currently expanding, human Dracon-dominated empire. And they have a new technology that they have created called Athera. And you could say that they have advanced significantly in technological stuff in the last 72 years. They have access to some really crazy stuff, some interesting stuff. So that's a completely different technology level. The Terran Empire also has command of a couple of dragons, not many. There's only 5 that exist as part of the Caeora Knights, the orders of the Caeora Knights. There are only 5 dragon riders in the Terran Empire, but yeah, they have a very strange mix of ancient traditions with the Caeora Knights, and also this rising technological and industrial sort of society. it's a perfect place for me to write like stories and things in, I think. Or somewhere where I'm personally very excited to write about anyway. Yeah, so this is exactly true. There's a lot of magic. There's a lot of high magic. Magic is everywhere in Ember, so technologies do have stagnated a bit in some cultures. Question, how many chapters do you envision the story taking? This current story we have worked out. In the game world currently, we have a plan, a pretty robust plan for chapters 1 through 6, and that is the end of the story at chapter 6. So that will finish off what we're calling a Shard of Fear, which is the Ember game that we are currently creating. Are there regional kingdoms or royalties, thrones? In some parts of the world, yes. In other parts of the world, no. So somewhere like the Kelmesians, all of those are independent nations or city-states. Some of them have princes. Some of them are ruled by, these sort of meritocracies. Like a meritocracy council, things like that. So they have all these different things. The Ward Call have different kingdoms as well. So it depends what culture you're talking about, but there are these different places. The Terran Empire obviously is this big, massive thing ruled by a central empress. Before the Terran Empire, 72 years ago, the kingdoms, it was the Terran kingdoms. So these are all these separate kings, all ruling separate kingdoms. Alright, well, that's the cultures. I have one last sort of little section I want to talk about, which is a bit of a big one, but I want to talk a little bit about timeline. So we talked about a few different events that happened, sort of, the Shattering 2,500 years ago. It's a big one. And this is another Ember or Leora sheet that Leora has written, or is currently updating, because this is like a current thing. I haven't quite finished this sheet yet. I want to do a few other notes and a few other little bits and pieces to explain some of this. But this is something that Leora has sort of worked out over her lifetime about, like, these are some of the events that she kind of thinks this is when this happened. And some of this is accurate. Like I say, I'd say 90% of this is accurate. But she does get some things wrong. So it's not entirely accurate. So I guess maybe like we could talk a little bit about the history, and I'll zoom in a little bit on this. So Leora believes that the cosmos is about 2.2 million years old, and when it was created, the moons were created as well, and the sun formed, and then the inner realms sort of formed after that. And then a huge period of time called the Dawn Age, where, Leora doesn't really know much about what's happening. But the first two sentient and sapient ancestries arose on Ember, the Zaxine and the Tharok. And Leora is somewhat certain of these, although maybe she's got the exact times and dates wrong. But she's pretty sure that the first two were these. But then, at some point, let me move over a little bit here, just going to make sure this is in frame. I'll be talking about something that's like, oh, it's not even on the slides. At some point, however, on the surface of Ember, Leviathans emerged. And from a sort of timeline perspective, when the Leviathans first started emerging upon the continent of Durin, which is to the very far away from the game world, game space that we've got, Leviathans arose about 800,000 years ago. And when they arose, that became the start of the Age of Beasts. So this is when a lot of life started appearing across the surface in massive amounts, massive jungles, forests. The wilds really became wild. These big, colossal creatures started spreading across the surface of Ember, like creating their own territories. It was a very wild place. Then Leora has started working out all of the the dates for when all the different ancestries arose. Some of them are really old. Some of them are obviously much younger, but some of the oldest ancestries that arose. I have Korak there twice. That's not right. That's not right at all. I can't remember what's supposed to be there. I'll have to check my notes. But yeah, so you have the Korak as one of the oldest, then the giants. Oh, I do know. Oh, I can't change it because it's not the editable one. That's supposed to be the Jan. The Jan arose 700,000 years ago. Then the giants, then the Varak, then the Vrunha, 550,000 years ago, and then the Sorvek, or the Sorvok, and then the Ashka, then the Zeth, 300,000 years ago, the Leafia, 250,000 years ago, the Caro, 190,000 years ago, the Wirun, 80,000 years ago, and then, 25,000 years ago, there was an event that happened called the Unveiling. This was a massive cataclysm that happened in the pathways, deeply affected the giants of Ember, and this is when the Age of the Tower is kind of considered to start on the end of the Age of the Beasts. Because after the Unveiling, some think because of it, the Nere emerged, and the Nere are the sort of ancestry that created the Adir Empire and eventually began construction of the Sun Tower. So the Nere emerge, then there's 2 troll invasions, then the Thornlings are 17,500 years ago, that's when they were created. Then there was something called the Forsaken War, which happened between the Therok and the Adir and the Teraphim 8,500 years ago. Then the Holgren came around 7,500 years ago. And then humans arrived 3,200 years ago. And it wasn't long before humans started spreading out around the world in what's known as the migrations. So that was about 3,000 years ago. Then you've got the Kavar and the Keth. Apologies for the spelling mistake there. Again, this isn't quite finished. And then the most important historical event on Ember, which is the Shattering, which happened 2,500 years ago. So as I've mentioned a couple times in this stream, and I'm sure some of you are aware, the Shattering was where the Adir Empire, and the Adir were this, I'll talk about them in a second, were this colossal empire that ruled most of the world 2,500 years ago. They had colonies everywhere, they built great cities, they built this huge sun tower. And then on the moment that it was, basically when it was finished, at the very top of the sun tower, there was a colossal explosion, a cataclysm in fact, that ripped across the surface of Ember and changed everything. Then we have the Kiska, arose just after the Shattering, some more migrations. We have the Evernite and Morian's Lament, where the Lumek start fighting the undead. Ordain was founded 1,716 years ago in the present. And the present date in Ember is 2,523 AS. So that's a speed run of the history, I guess. Certainly, there's a lot more to it than that if you look through all the history articles in the setting compendium. But yeah. Question: is there any more lore about the Vanguard, the group that opposes the Taeans? Yes, but not in the 7 Compendium. They are a group that is vehemently opposed to the Taean Empire. They are currently not very successful though. Leora has to double check. Yeah, Leora has to double check. Yeah, I think I've got it wrong. I think that there shouldn't be 2 troll invasions either. I finished this slide yesterday, so maybe I shouldn't have rushed. I'll fix it before it goes in the game world. No, it's not intentional. I think there's something else that needs to go there. Wait, some of the shard gods in the deity, some of the shard gods could be hundreds of thousands of years old? Absolutely, yes. There are several shard gods that are hundreds of thousands of years old. The oldest shard god that is part of the 19, which is the pantheon of Ordain and the Arcturians, and the Weirds and the Kithel and so on and so forth, is Malay. Malay is considered one of the first shard gods ever, and she is a Jan shard god. She's not a human shard god. She's not some other ancestry. She's a Jan, and so the Jan came around about, what was it, 700,000 years ago. So she potentially is probably about 650,000 years old. So she's ancient. But not as old as the elder gods, because all the elder gods are millions of years old. I just realised it's getting dark. Let me turn down that light. We got trolled. So did Ember. Question, what was the purpose of building that sun tower? Yeah, that's one of the... So, before I can answer that question, because it's a really good question, before I can answer that question, I need to explain a little bit about some of my... how I think about that question a little bit. So, there are some mysteries and some fundamental things about the Ember setting and the world building that I know that I'll never tell anyone else, deliberately. And the exact nature of the shattering is one of those things. So I will never tell anyone, not even Andrew knows, who is obviously the co-creator of the game. Not even Andrew knows what the shattering was. He knows what it was and what happened, but not how it happened, what caused it, and what the motivations were for the idea to basically make it and what exactly happened. I will say that it's a pretty mind-boggling thing, and the story for that can be told, I think, at some point in the future. Whether or not that's told in another game that we make, or as a part of a book, but it is a foundational mystery that I want to leave as something that people just don't know. Leora doesn't know, that's for sure. Not many do. Question, do you have ideas for what the reasons for the migration events, usually accompanied by drastic cataclysmic events, or were there at grounds or results of other major events like the Shattering, etc.? Also, who went where, displaced who during the migrations? If it is laid out. It is absolutely laid out. It's not currently in the game world, but I do have articles in my notes about the migrations. I can show you a little bit. So one of the things that happened, maybe if I grab my tablet, I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail here because it's a very interesting question for me. But humanity arose from the Jan. The Jan went extinct the moment that humanity came into existence. So all the Jan basically turned into humans through a process that nobody is quite sure about. So the Jarn lived in this area of the world for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, and they were quite static as a sort of ancestry and as a people. They didn't have the dynamic sort of the dynamism of humanity, and so the first host migrations were basically humanity becoming a thing. Many of them stayed around in the same areas and built cities and kingdoms in the Aran Peninsula. But the first migration, before the Shattering, was as humanity started sort of migrating northwards and into the sort of where the Kelmesian culture now lives. So they sort of spread out into sort of this area, and even across the ocean into the Maziran Caeora. And then the second host migration happened after that. So that was when the humans went even further, and they started sort of going off, into these directions. And then the third host migration was because of there was basically a plague. The virulent plague happened in the Aran Peninsula, which still exists in some places here, where a lot of humans spread out even more. So you kind of get over the centuries, and humans are still kind of a little bit in there as well, are still kind of exploring outwards and moving into areas. You could consider in the current era of the setting, I've not written this officially, but humans are present in the Bajak and the Ward Call up here now as well. So you've got this kind of and also in the second host migration, you got humans down in Caeora as well. So you've kind of got humans going up further. That was maybe more in depth than you wanted to know about, but yeah, it was mostly sort of like it was a series of events. One of them was a plague. That also means there's a 50% chance that Caeora is wrong about what caused the shattering, because I also know what truly caused the shattering, and I've not told this to anybody. Yes, that's perfectly acceptable too. Andrew's got his ideas about what the shattering is. The Lord Master is arguing. No, I mean, Andrew. I'm sure Andrew has a pretty sort of interesting take on what the shattering is, and I'm sure that many people in the world might think that there are probably different competing theories about what it is. In fact, I know there are different theories that people think about the shattering. Again, going back to the beginning of the stream, like everybody in the world can see the broken tower. Like the broken tower is like the permanent reminder of the shattering, and a lot of cultures are deeply affected by the cataclysm that occurred during that. Yeah, different ideas. Okay, on 3. We'll both say it. Didn't Themis also bring humans through the Shana Mountains too, or does that not count? Yes, Themis did too. Although that doesn't really count as a migration. That's a deific influence. So yeah. So this is basically the timeline. Since we're talking about the shattering, I think the last slide I'm basically gonna talk about today is the idea, I think it's pretty interesting to me that we have this setting and this thing, and it's been done in other fantasy worlds, I know. But one of the primary sort of storytelling elements in my brain for the world building is this shattering. And in order to have a shattering, in order to have this cataclysmic event, in order to have this permanent reminder, I had to create this whole like ancient civilization, which became the Adir, the Sunfire Empire, that existed for maybe 15,000 years, 10,000 years, depending on what you would call it, an empire or not. They were a continuous culture, so they definitely existed for a very long time. And it took them thousands of years, maybe 7,000 years or so. Construction of it actually began after the Forsaken War, so it definitely took them thousands of years, maybe 5,000 years or so, to build this massive structure, which they crafted using technology, crafted using magic, rather than technology. You can see on this image here that was drawn by Rita, one of our amazing artists, that there are these. This is like an example of what the broken tower looks like in today's world, in the present. But all of these tiny little towers here are massive Adir cities. So you see on the left, this is the scale of one of these sort of cities. And then this is the broken tower in the background. So it was truly gigantic. And the cataclysm, the actual sort of, cataclysm that resulted from the Sunfire Empire making a, well, okay, maybe I said, yeah, it was pretty big. So a lot of attention, I think, has been got. I put a lot of my thought into making the Sunfire Empire feel pretty well established. One of the fun things. This is the second to last slide. One of the fun things I just want to show, because I'm really proud of this, as a world builder, as somebody who writes lore and stuff. The Adir have a fully functional language. So I worked this out, a month or so ago, a couple months ago even. So that you can speak Adir if you want. Zompiv Caeora. And you can write Adir as well. So this is fun stuff. This is something I did as a kind of like personal thing because I was really interested in it rather than something necessarily for work. But it may be incorporated into riddles or clues or things that Adir, people who are searching for lore in some of our upcoming quests, maybe they've got little written things that they need to work out. But yeah. That is pretty much all that I was going to talk about today. So if you want to ask me any more questions, I will happily answer them, but I got no more slides. No more big topics to talk about. We can talk about little topics. We can talk about like all of these things that you've been listening to me talk for the last 2.5 hours, and you're like, yeah, can you go back and can you talk a little bit about blah, blah, blah? Sure, I can talk about blah, blah, blah for a little bit. Question. How much of this history does the common folk know? Not a lot. Not a lot at all. If we're talking about Game World, Arctis Plateau, or Dane, they definitely know about the Shattering. Don't know anything before that. Pretty hit and miss about what information they know about some of these other big topics. They know about the founding of the Star Academy because the Star Mages have visited them, but they have very limited sort of historical knowledge. Question, any thoughts about publishing a physical book for Ember? So yeah, as part of the Kickstarter, we're going to be making a book. We're going to be calling it the Setting Primer, and it's going to contain a lot of really cool information. Yeah, it's still being made. I mean, most of the setting compendium has now been written to the extent that we can now create that book. But the process of creating a physical book is quite taxing because we've never, as Foundry VTT, we've never done that before. So there's a lot of challenges involved. Is there food? Yeah, so creating some of those like basic sentences about like "Hello, is there food?" It was quite fun using some of those stuff. And there's obviously it's not a finished language. I would need to write a proper dictionary for it to be a finished language. But yeah, all the building blocks are there for it to be like a fully spoken and written out language. Question, sneak peek language showcase. What are the linguistic and phonetic inspirations? So this was, the phonetic, I suppose, is based a little bit on my ideas about a very bright language. Sort of like High Latin, or it's got a little element of grammatically, the way that it's pronounced, I mean, or the way that the words come together, it's got a little element of sort of ancient, sort of Mayan or some of the sort of South American languages. The way that it has Aza as kind of like the sun, and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a mix between a bunch of different things. But I definitely wanted like a very fast. It cuts out some of the letters even, and so when you speak it, sometimes it has a very like flowing, very quick way of speaking. It completely cuts out some of the stuff that you might say in English to make sense. But if you're two ideas speaking to one another, you're able to like communicate very quickly, very fast. Question, what are the plans for extending the possible ancestry and class choices? So for ancestries, there are a couple of things we may add way into the future. There are sort of a couple more ancestries that we've created as part of the world building process of. We go back to ancestries. There are a couple in here that you could potentially play in a far distant future. The Caeora is a big example. Varak, if they're still around. The Sorvok, or Sorvek. But not many more. There's not many other ancestries that are actually in the overall world. Two of the other big ones may be the Raxor or the Zaxine, if you ever go to the undersurface. But again, like this isn't part of our plan for the Ember game that we're currently writing right now. But they are there, so potentially if we go beyond the Ember game that we're writing right now, we could do those. Different cultures though, we have plans to make many of the regional cultures playable. I don't know exactly how many. I'm going to have to negotiate maybe a little bit with Andrew. But we have the Striders, the Bajak, the Oaken, the Kelmesians, the Kessians, the Raylan as well. So we have a few different options of cultures that we definitely want to add, or we're thinking about adding. So I think, yeah, there's a few choices there. Question, I'm going to ask about the tower again. I understand that you said you can't explain why it was created. But if I was a PC and asked that question, this character got very studious, what would a DM tell them? Surely there are popular theories. Yes, there are, and there are some things in that are very interesting. I would say that probably the leading theory is that the Adir did it because they were arrogant. Many people believe that they built the Sun Tower to capture the power of Lantir. and to, you know, maybe break for giveaway time. Oh, I completely forgot about giveaways. Yes, we shall do giveaways now as well. But the probably the leading theory is that it was very land tier focused, but also it was a hubris thing. So there's a lot of there's some myths and legends and folk tales about the hubris of the Adir. Many people look back on the Adir as a culture or as an empire. They think that they were very arrogant, foolhardy, and they did these things because they had, you know, no sort of. They thought they wouldn't have any consequences. So I think that's probably the big one. Some people also believe that they were trying to do some weird things with souls, but again, like, not sure how much we need to get into on that. But there is a couple of different ideas. Can't say I was expecting Conlang. Yeah, well, I think it's a pretty fascinating subject. It's something that can come up in a format like this for the game world. Certainly, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think anybody really needs to learn Adir to play the game. But some people do like that kind of thing. I think that if you were to create a puzzle, you might want to use Adir if you had like an ancient puzzle for something. Okay, before I answer this question, Raxray, I'm going to do the giveaways. So, I think you just have to be logged into Twitch. Now I need to draw a winner. So I can draw a winner in the game world. Andrew, you're gonna have to. How do I do the thing? How do I do the thing? Give me a second. Oh, okay. Just give us a second. We're going to generate a roll table in Foundry VGT, and I'm going to click on the roll table, and we're going to get a giveaway. So this is either going to be a Foundry VGT license. I assume many of you already have one of those, but you know, or a copy of Ember, which is really cool, or a copy of the Lunar Ember dice. Your choice if you win. If you win, you need to send a DM to Foundry VGT on Twitch saying, "Hi, I won," and we will get you the details of what you need to do to redeem your prize. But yeah, I'm gonna do 2 rolls of these, I think. So it is currently getting set up. While it's getting set up, I'll answer another question. During the Forsaken War, the Teraphim got involved, correct? What was it like for them to work with the Adir and other Shard Gods, considering the Teraphim's general disposition? It was a generally quite harmonious alliance during the war. After the war, however, it completely split sort of directions and you know, ideas about what needed to do, what needed to happen, or how things worked. The Forsaken War was this war between the Adir, the Teraphim from Luxarum, and the Therok, the really ancient ancestry of Ember. Yeah, it was a really massive sort of world war. A lot of different cultures got involved. Yeah, they were all aligned on what they needed to do. They just sort of fell apart. The alliance fell apart after the war ended. Okay. I think I answered about more playable cultures, but just to clarify, hello. Leora is a finish. Paw poop poopy. What the hell? How dare you? A poopy head. Okay, well, that's. Thank you, Andrew. I think Andrew's Andrew's having a drink, being a little shit. Okay, so we've got all the names here, so I'm going to do a little roll. Good luck, everyone. So again, this is for. I'm gonna do this twice. We're gonna get one result, and that's for a copy of Foundry PGT, Ember, or the Lunar Dice. So good luck, and we'll do the first draw. Yeah. Okay, I'm not even gonna pronounce these names. Some of these are gonna be Edumaru. I can't spell. I can't. I'm somewhat dyslexic. You know, as somebody who's written a lot of stories and world building, a massive setting, I am slightly dyslexic. You know, I can't really speak very well. So yes, Ed Marie, you have won. So if you're in the chat, just say hi, and yes, send a PM to Foundry VGT on Twitch, to this Twitch channel, and just say, hey, I won the giveaway, and we will get you a copy. Okay, congratulations. Let us do one more roll. Darkest Sky 92. I think you have just won. If you're here, please say something. Fantastic. Once again, just Dark Steel Spork, you just missed out, unfortunately. But yes, Darkest Sky, send a message to Foundry VGT. Also, thank you, Andrew. Leora is the coolest. Amazing. She is really cool. Alright, cool. Well, I will answer a couple more questions, and then I will start wrapping things up. Let us go back to my little thing here. Congratulations to the 2 winners. There's a lot of... are there anything in here? Any more questions that I can sift through from above? Telcar, question, will a guide for suggestions of wrong infos for arcade will be possible? Critical fails, dubious knowledge. I think that would be nice, yeah. I don't think we have enough of that kind of thing. It would be nice to do a little bit more roll tables as well, using the Foundry's roll table system. Especially for something like dubious knowledge of something. That would be really cool. Question, we have some people involved in other languages for more local content than English. I assume you mean language translation. For the Ember setting, potentially that's easier, although it's a huge amount of text. The game world is harder because the text isn't finished yet. We're still in early access. We're going to be in early access for a while yet. We're still going to be writing content. We're still going to be editing content. So there's going to be corrections based on player feedback and testing, especially like balance testing and things like that over the course of months, or even beyond that. We'll probably still be tweaking this. We'll probably still be tweaking the game for years. So language translation in-house will be tricky. And currently right now we don't have a good way of licensing anybody to publish it. Although I will say that if you do want to do a personal translation, you can do that, but you have to do it in a tricky way. If you want to learn how to do that, the best place to ask is on the Discord, because people can suggest how to separate out the content and translate it. We require the Foundry Wizard. Yes, Andrew, you're a wizard. Any other questions? Just gonna skim through. Question: what is Andrew's favorite Ember content? And will Lantir find a reason to burn it in the next patch? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. No matter whatever Andrew says, it's gonna get burned. Well, speaking of official people, speaking of Foundry PTT in other languages, we have no plans to do an official thing for that. No, not at this time anyway, because it's still something that's in active development. It would be a lot of work. Right, cool. Well, I think that is it for today, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed the stream. I don't think we've got any other questions. I hope this was a good introduction into the Ember setting. Didn't talk too much about the story necessarily, but that's okay. Maybe that's for another time. It was awesome talking about all these different things on stream again. I'll probably be back next year talking about the story. I think that would be a good thing to talk about, see what progress we have on the chapters, see where we are as we enter Endgame. And the ending of the A Shard of Fear. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. Congratulations to 2 people that won some licenses. And yeah, I'm just going to do one final thing, which is we have Free Project Friday coming up tomorrow, which is going to be a stream with the Foundry VTT development team, where they're going to be showing off some cool projects. So if you're interested in that kind of thing. But if you're interested in more Ember stuff, specifically gameplay showcase, so if you really like Ember, or you know enjoyed what I was talking about, then Andrew is going to do a Ember gameplay showcase on Sunday, which will start 2 hours after this one started, I think. So this one started at 1 ET, so I think it's at 3 p.m. ET on Sunday. So check out that. And yeah, cool. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to have a nice rest. I hope everybody has an amazing weekend. I'll see you all around.